Evening, guys. I think it's only fitting after the passing of marvellous Marvin Hagler at the weekend that we did a special tonight. We're going to concentrate on Hagler, but I'm sure the conversation will evolve into other areas of middleweights. But just a little bit of background. So Hagler started his professional career in 1972 and fought all the way until 1987, when he had his last fight against Sugar Ray. And as everybody knows, quite a controversial fight. Hagler wasn't impressed at the end, didn't agree with the scorecards, and never fought afterwards. Hung his gloves up, disappeared off the face of the planet pretty much. And just lived a quiet life after that. I think he might have even gone into movies. Is that right, Carl?
Yeah, I think he did appear in a few movies.
In terms of Hagler's record, he had 62 fights, 3 losses, and 2 draws. In those 62 fights, he had 52 knockouts, which relates to a knockout percentage of 84, which is outstanding in anybody's record. Of the 3 defeats, he lost to Bobby Watts, which he avenged. He also lost to William Monroe. He also avenged that defeat as well. And then the last one was obviously the Sugar Ray Leonard one, which was his last fight ever. Couple of draws. Both the people that he drew against. The first one was in 1974. Sugar Ray Seals, I think his name is. Hagler had already fought him once before and stopped him. And then he went to go up against a guy called Vito Autofermo.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. And once again, Hagler fought him after that draw, and he retired in his stall. So apart from the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, he avenged everything that wasn't a win, an instant win. And I've said it already. I said at the end of the last show we did on Tuesday that this might be controversial to a few people, but I'll put Marvin Hagler down as the best middleweight ever. That record itself, it's almost second to none. I mean, I looked at a few of these top tens that are banded about by people. All of them that I've seen have got Hagler in the top 4. Most of them have him in the top 3. But looking at his record against the others that are in the top 10, his knockout percentage beats all of them. But he was that style fighter, very aggressive, very come forward, didn't take a step back, had an absolute granite chin. Absolute legend, in my opinion. Very sad to see him go. What do you reckon, Carl?
So, as you know, and I'm a bit of a young pup, so I didn't have the pleasure of seeing Hagler to this career. If I'm honest, obviously I've watched it on YouTube. Yeah, what a fight! How active he was as well.
It's crazy because that 1972 to 87, that's 15 years. And in that 15-year period, he had 62 fights.
Yeah, you tell me another fighter who's that active.
Well, none of them. No one. I mean, I've looked at these records of these that are in this supposed top 10, top 5, whatever you want to say of middleweights of all time, and you can even talk about the other 3 in that golden era. Now, there's a bit of a difference in Sugar Ray Duran and Tommy Owens because they all shifted divisions. You know, they were all world champions at other divisions. And although that sounds amazing and it is really good, these fighters get into a position where they pick fights a little bit and they pick the world title fights that they want. People that, they don't necessarily go against the number 1 in that division. They'll pick a world title up and then they'll move on to another weight and pick a world title up and move on to another weight. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to do. It's not at all. But to be a world champion, a unified world champion, undisputed world champion, for the period of time that Marvin Hagler was at middleweight, that takes some doing. And we all know.
I guess it's
you've put the fight on the screen. You've probably the most famous one is War. Hagler against Stearns.
I think trouble is, Andy, it's a kind of what you like boxing. Pick what you like.
Of course. And yeah, I know it's a very bold statement for me to say that I believe Hagler's the best middleweight ever, and I'm saying that because he stayed at that division and didn't. He didn't go to 5 different weights and maybe have 1 or 2 fights in them and then move on to the next. He stayed at that division, like you've just said yourself. How active was it?
Yeah.
And that knockout percentage of 84%.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anybody who likes the sweet science and going to debate Sugar Ray with you, aren't they?
Oh, of course, no, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And it's hard for me to say otherwise. I mean, you look at Sugar Ray's record. Here's the interesting thing, right? Sugar Ray fought for nearly 20 years. And he only had 36 fights.
Doesn't take away from his ability, though, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I mean, absolute fantastic fighter, mate. And the fact that he was a 5-weight world champion tells you that, don't it?
Yeah.
You don't win belts at that many different weights if you haven't got the quality. And he's probably in there as one of the best fighters of all time. But the reason I don't put him higher than Hagler as a middleweight is because of how long Hagler stayed at that weight and reigned supreme at that weight. In my opinion, and it's only my opinion, I think Hagler beat Sugar Ray in that last fight.
Very controversial, wasn't it?
It was controversial, and Hagler was devastated, and that's why he never fought again. And it took him. I mean, he didn't speak to Sugar Ray Leonard for a long, long time afterwards, from what I understand. And and when they did finally talk, I think Sugar Ray said it in documentaries that they weren't the best of mates. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So it really hurt him, that loss, and he'd lost a couple of times previous, but this was like the ultimate fight, wasn't it? Sugar Ray was golden boy. He was the darling of America. Won Olympic gold, didn't he, Sugar Ray?
Yep.
So he was the darling of America. Everybody loved him. And then you've got Marvin Hagler come up off the streets, had to work doubly hard at everything to get anywhere. Probably didn't get the credit at the time he deserved. He's got the credit nowadays, but he probably didn't get the credit at the time he deserved for what he did. So going up against Sugar Ray, that was probably the fight he wanted to win more than anything. And then you get the controversy at the end, and it's probably easy to judge that fight whichever way you like. And I'm probably judging it through rose-tinted glasses a little bit, being Hagler fan and liking his style. But yeah, I've watched it a million times, and I don't see it any other way.
I think it comes back to old age, and that a boxer will always be a brawler.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, you could say that, but Tommy Hearns didn't find that, did he, when he was laying on his back after 3 rounds?
No, but I think Sugar Ray's a lot better. Not a lot, no, that's unfair, but
Hearns himself, mate, was a 5-weight world champion.
Yep. I just think
so. Hearns
a boxer will be a brawler.
Yeah. No, you're probably right, mate. And the majority of times that's the case. But Marvin Hagler was more than just a brawler. He had proper boxing style, proper boxing skill. He knew how to close a ring off. He knew how to get inside of people. He was very compact, solid, had a great chin, amazing engine, never stopped, always pushed forward. Absolute quality, mate. And I'll argue all day long with anybody that. I mean, there's some amazing names in this top 10 middleweights of all time. There's some amazing names. Funnily enough, it hasn't got the other 3 from that golden era in there because basically for the same reason I said, because they didn't stay at middleweight. They were welterweight, they were middleweight, they were super middleweight, they were light heavyweight. They were all over, weren't they? So that's probably why they're not in the top 10. But let me reel off a couple of names for you. Jake LaMotta, Bernard Hopkins,
right.
Sugar Ray Robinson. He's pretty much everyone's number one on these top 10s.
Now, Ray, let's jump in there, and Ray, I don't know if you've heard Andy's opening gambit, a very strong case for Mr. Hearns and Hagler.
Yep.
A good case for Hearns as well, but I get the feeling from Tuesday that you're going to jump in and talk about Sugar Ray.
That's exactly who. So when we last spoke, and Andy at the close was like, Hagler's the number 1 middleweight. I guess, to be fair to him, it goes in eras, doesn't it? Because I had this conversation with my dad, and it's kind of like he sees it as there's different eras in boxing. You've got your modern era, which Hagler would fall into, and then you've got your all-timer era, which Sugar Ray Robinson would fall into. But for me, because Sugar Ray Robinson, for me, I think, in my opinion, best fighter that laced up the gloves, I would say he was the best middleweight of all time. But don't get me wrong. And it's interesting that I like the way you mentioned about Hagler's record compared to Leonard's. But then again, that could come to different styles, because if you look at Tommy Hearns, I'm sure Tommy Hearns had about 60 odd fights as well.
Tommy Hearns had 61 fights, 5 losses, 1 draw.
Yeah.
He had a knockout percentage of 78%.
Yeah, and Duran had a fair few fights as well.
103.
Yeah.
16 losses.
Mm-hmm.
No draws. He had a knockout percentage of 68. Now, obviously, Sugar Ray Leonard's knockout percentage is not going to be anywhere near the same as Hagler's because of his style.
He was in that style. Yeah.
His knockout percentage is 69%.
I think he had 25 knockouts, didn't he, or something like that?
He had 25 knockouts out of 36 fights.
Yeah.
Three losses, 1 draw. To be fair to Sugar Ray, though, two of his losses came right at the very tail end of his career against people he wouldn't have lost to.
Yeah.
Andy, can I jump in a minute? Are you penalising Sugar Ray because he jumped around the weights?
No. Listen, I'd put, if you was talking about best fighters of all time, I would put Sugar Ray Leonard probably above Hagler. The reason my comment was, I think Hagler's the best middleweight of all time because he stayed up at middleweight.
You see Leonard more as an all-time. It's a bit like Duran. Duran, for me, all-time great lightweight.
Yeah.
When he stepped up, he was good, but he lost that greatness. So for me, it's about sometimes some fighters are pigeonholed with a certain weight, and that was their optimum weight. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and so like I was just saying about the all-time top 10 or the top 10 best so-called best middleweights of all time. Sugar Ray, Tommy Hearns, and Duran, they're not in there because of Sugar Ray won 5 world titles at 5 different weights. Tommy Hearns did the same, 5-weight world champion. Duran was a 4-weight world champion. But because they moved about so much, it's hard to say. Well, they're a fantastic. They're in the top so many best middleweights because they didn't stay at middleweight.
I still think
how many fights they had at the different weights.
I still think there's a degree of pick and boxer though, pick and fight. It's what a bit like judges, isn't it? It's what you like, when you get a close round.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that either of you are wrong. I knew before I come on. I knew from the comment that I made on Tuesday night that Ray was going to jump on this as soon as he came on. And I had my suspicions that you'd go down the route of Sugar Ray, to be quite honest. I can't argue with it. All I'm saying, for me, my favourite, and his record stands up in that middleweight division.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those who, in a way, in modern era, you could talk about Calzaghe, who is only getting the credit years after he's hung up the gloves. For me, I think he did it the hard way, the original hard way.
Although Ray, just to jump in there, he got beat to Hopkins.
Sorry?
Calzaghe lost to Hopkins.
No, I had Calzaghe winning that. I had Calzaghe winning that. But for Hagler, he did it the hard way, and I think that sort of, because he did it the hard way, that grit and determination, I think, led to that long run. And I think, didn't he end up with 12 consecutive wins at middleweight? And then Monzon had the record at 14 or something like that. So he wasn't far off. So he's when you look at the fact that he pretty much, apart from the Leonard fight, you could say he's avenged everyone that he had a blemish against.
Yeah.
Apart from it, I think that's when that's why he was so desperate for the Leonard rematch, and Leonard wouldn't give him it. But I think if you look at if you take away the Leonard defeat, he's practically avenged all these blemishes.
No, he did. The other 2 losses that he had, he beat both of them.
Yep.
Almost straight after.
Yeah, and the Italian that he drew against.
Sorry?
The Italian, I think he drew against an Italian, didn't he?
He drew, yeah. I stumbled over his name.
Vito someone or something like that, yeah.
He was a Vito Ortofermo.
Well done.
So he, he drew against him, but then not too many fights afterwards fought him again, and the guy retired on his stool. The other draw was against Sugar Ray Seals, is it? And Hagler had fought him previously before the draw and beat him.
Yeah.
The other two losses, Willie Munro. That was in 1976, and he fought him again in 1977 and knocked him out. A guy called Bobby Watts in 1975, and then fought him again in 1980 and knocked him out. So yeah, he's avenged everything, every loss apart from the Sugar Ray one. And like you say, Sugar Ray won't give him a rematch, so he never fought again. And I was saying to Carl, he never spoke to him for years after. I think he held a really big grudge over that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you guys have read the book, the Four Kings, but there's some really interesting stuff on there on Hagler. It's a really intimate stuff. But I think Hagler was one of those that always had that. You see fighters and they say they've got a grudge against another fighter, then they're fighting the best of friends. But Hagler still had that menace that he had in a ring with fighters afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think it's no surprise because you see it, what you saw with Hagler is what you got.
Yeah.
And I think that resonated with people. And,
he was all business, wasn't
he? Yeah. He didn't mess about. He was the fight, well, it was originally called the fight before it came to be known as the war, but that's what he was all about. He was just a soldier, really. The guy was just a little warrior.
Look at that video now. Just stalking him. Stalking Tommy Hearns. I mean, Tommy Hearns was a great fighter.
He was a great mover, yeah. Had a wonderful job. But
he's closing the ring down. He's not allowing Tommy Hearns a second.
Not in breathing space. But this is the thing, though, guys. This is what modern day boxers should be watching, because there's a difference between cutting off the ring and just following an opponent.
Yeah.
I don't think people are mastering that art. It's
what I would say is he can take a shot as well, so he can afford to come forward like that. Not all boxers can take the shots that Hagler could take, to be fair.
Good point.
I've watched his fight a few times, and he takes some shots, don't he?
Was it the first round or second round? He got cut really bad, and they nearly stopped the fight.
Yeah. In fact, I gave that first round to Tommy Hearns because of that. Yeah. But I was just about to say there on what Carl said, because Hagler was so great and he had so many different qualities. You don't often hear people talk about his chin, which his chin and conditioning was second to none.
Yeah.
I think he was only dropped once, and I think there was probably a bit of, it was a bit controversial. Obviously, he's been, but I don't think he was really hurt in many fights.
Well, Tommy Hearns can bang, can't he?
Yeah.
Oh, but you saw his knockout against Duran.
Yeah. I mean, he can bang. His knockout percentage, Tommy Hearns, over the 61 fights, is 78%, which is really, really top draw. And Leonard's not. I mean, sorry. Marvin Hagler's not. He's not backing down in this fight one little bit. He's not scared of that. He's staying on it. He's not taking it one step backwards at any point.
What about the fitness levels as well?
Oh, outstanding. Well, to do that, to be able to do that, even though it's only 3 rounds, to be able to do that constantly, and he's throwing punches all the time. Your fitness levels have got to be outstanding, aren't they?
Because Hearns looks a bit spent to me towards the end of this fight. He looks a bit beat up, doesn't he? And broke his arm, I think.
Yeah, because I think it goes on to the, when they talk about boxing being 90% mental, if you're giving somebody the hardest shots, and if you were to look back at history, Tommy Hearns would be in most people's top 30, top 25, maybe even top 20 punches of all time. So when you're hitting somebody as hard as what Tommy can, and the guy's just taking it, it's going to drain you.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I think as well, one of the other things about his conditioning is it goes on to the point where you were both saying about people moving through the weights. Hagler stuck at the weight from when he turned pro to his last fight. How many fighters do you see doing that? Obviously, take away Frotch, you know, your lad from Nottingham. Fighters, they go up. He at 5'9" or 5'8", whatever he was, stuck at that weight.
Yeah.
Made it no problem every single time. His fitness
that's down to the want of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And you know, and he came with that famous saying, "It's hard to get out of bed when you got silk pajamas on."
Yeah,
but he was still getting out of bed.
Wow.
You know, he was still getting out of bed doing the hard rounds, and then there's the result of the hard work, which you're just seeing there.
And also not blowing up between fights.
Yeah.
It's
Dedication.
It's that professionalism and standard of wanting it that badly.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't see in fighters. Very rare in fighters these days.
Yeah.
You don't get many fighters walking around at almost fight weight.
Yeah, and even with the weigh-ins now, the day before, I mean, most fighters, I mean, you guys will know from, you know, you're talking about most of them will go up to 2 stone, 2 stone above. There's too much emphasis on you know, the strength and conditioning coming in so light, so that when you're on fight night, you're much bigger and stronger. Where this guy was, these greats from the 80s were just about pure boxing, dedicating themselves to the craft and relying on their skill rather than their superior, you know, just being bigger and stronger. And, you know, I mean, I was watching an old Hagler fight. He fought somebody from Leicester. I think it was Tony Simpson or something like that.
All right.
This guy was physically a lot bigger than Hagler. So
was that the one at Wembley, Ray?
I think so, yeah. But Hagler walked him down. I couldn't believe it. Hagler got him out there 6 rounds and he walked him down against a bigger and stronger opponent. And tactically, you're thinking he's fighting the wrong fight there, but he was able to. Skill. Just
these levels, like, you know, all these, you hear it all the time, don't you? It's a well-known phrase that all these pundits come out with. There's levels in boxing.
Yeah.
And he's right up there with the ultimate, I think. So where do you sit? Where do you sit Hagler in all-time middleweights then, Ray?
He's high. I mean, I've got Sugar Ray at the top.
Sugar Ray Leonard or Robinson?
Robinson. Leonard, for me, I don't. Did he say middleweights there? Yeah.
Just middleweights,
yeah. I don't put Sugar Ray Leonard in my middleweight list because for me, he's optimum. For me, he's optimum weight that he was best at. For me, is down at welterweight. So, I don't put him in my middleweights. But I've got people like Monzon in there. I've got like Lamotta.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research, as you can probably tell. I'm reading while I'm talking to you. Carlos Monzon is in. I looked at a few, and he's in the top 3 of everybody's.
Yeah.
I'll hold my hands up. I've never seen him fight.
Not caught anything on YouTube.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't. No. So I'll hold my hands up there. So I don't know. I mean, you know, you're telling me he's great. These are telling me that he's really good. So
yeah.
Was he Argentinian?
Yeah.
So they've all got Sugar Ray Robinson right up there. They've all got Carlos Monzon right up there.
Let me throw one in.
Go on.
Roy Jones Jr. I think he was absolutely mustard at middleweight.
Yeah.
I mean, what you've got to think about, though, is with Roy Jones Jr., and I agree with you, but he's another one that jumped up through the weights. The only thing is, who did he have Who did he have in his era at middleweight?
Yeah, I agree. He didn't really have a dance partner, did he? But
That's the only thing.
He had Hopkins early on, didn't he?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he's probably in. He's got to be in probably the top 20. But there's so many in this top 10 that I've never heard of, because you're talking people from like the very early
yeah.
19,
Ali Greb and people like that.
like 19,
Yeah.
Bob Fitzsimmons and
Oh yeah, the
people like that.
Englishman, yeah.
Andy, you're old enough to remember him, aren't you?
Yeah, righto, not far off. So there's lots of fighters that I've not seen.
This is the thing, Andy and Carl. I think it's like what my dad was saying earlier about splitting them into eras.
Yeah.
But obviously, some people don't, because I think for some people they will talk about these guys that were, when the Queen's Rules was just kind of first coming about, and then you've got the guys, like that. And then you've got the guys in more towards the modern era. Like, so maybe 10 years time, people have mentioned Bernard Hopkins quite high up in that list,
and probably Joe Calzaghe as well.
Yeah, for like super middleweights, and then you've got people who look at us, or maybe Golovkin, maybe in a decade's time.
I mean, the only thing with Joe Calzaghe, which maybe goes against him being an all-time great.
There's one thing that goes against him.
Sorry, what was that?
What was that, Cole?
I said he bottled it against Frotch. There's one thing that goes against him. Radar, you think Calzaghe slaps Frotch all over, don't you?
Yeah. And I'm a massive Carl Frotch fan. I think Calzaghe would win that points. Yeah.
Should I tell you what I think happens in that?
Go on then.
I think Frotch cuts the ring off because Joe Calzaghe is well known for slapping. I think Carl Frotch cuts the ring off and stops him.
Yeah.
I think Carl Frotch.
You back said about Joe Calzaghe slaps.
Yeah, I think Carl Frotch would have broke him up, Red Eye.
Do you think so?
Yeah. And that's not me Nottingham. That's not bias for Nottingham. I just genuinely believe it.
I'm going to be the voice of reason here, because I think Carl's had a few sherbets tonight, by the sounds of it.
No.
You don't seriously think that Frotch beats Calzaghe, do you?
Yeah.
I can't see it.
I think, remember, Calzaghe would. It was nowhere near his prime when Frotch was talking about fighting him.
No, it wasn't. And Frotch might have beat him then, but if you're talking prime Calzaghe against prime Frotch,
Calzaghe wins.
Calzaghe wins all day long, mate. His engine is, and you might be slaps.
He'd have probably done him on point. He'd have probably done Frotch on points. Similarities to Andre Ward, I'm guessing. Where it made it maybe difficult for him. Moved around the ring a lot.
But he's a bit more than that, isn't it? He throws a million shots.
Yeah, and Andre Ward's kind of like, he pot shots and he's quite defensive and he fights out of that sort of like free shot.
His evasive skills.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. But I think Calzaghe is prime. I think we were very lucky with Calzaghe, and I think he suffered a little bit, like what we mentioned with HAGLER. He was underappreciated, and he's only seemed to be getting it once he's hung up the gloves. Yeah.
Another middleweight to throw in the mix is I'm not saying he's the best, but I enjoyed watching him, and that's De La Hoya. I enjoyed his style.
What a left hook Oscar De La Hoya had. Terrific fight.
Robert scored him. Well, did he score him? Probably didn't score him, to be fair.
That's Andy said something in terms of a controversial thing, saying that he felt HAGLER beat Leonard. I would say Leonard won that. But it's interesting because I've watched the De La Hoya Floyd Mayweather fight, and I've scored that fight really, really close. I've got Floyd just winning it by 1 round. I thought De La Hoya won the early rounds. I thought he won the early rounds, and then Floyd took over. But it's very, very, some of the rounds are very, very difficult to score. but it
Ray,
depends on what you like.
where do you put a couple of modern middleweights in that list, such as Triple G, Canelo? You could argue is a middleweight. Do you think they're giving look?
Triple G for me isn't even close to any of these guys, mate.
I think
Not
that's a bit
even
harsh, I do.
No, it's not even close.
Okay, Andy, I've got one for you. He went on. I'm not saying I would put him in there, but I've heard his name mentioned on some of the Facebook groups that I've gotten. Carl, you ask you as well. Do you remember Kelly Pavlik?
Yeah.
Jermaine Taylor? What do you think about those guys in terms of what they achieved during their time?
Jermaine Taylor never stepped up to super middle, should I?
No. I agree with that call.
It's same thing again, though. I'm not disputing they were great fighters, but you have to look at who they had in their era.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking with HAGLER here, and I keep going back to him because it is about HAGLER this show, even though we've digressed. Just the other three guys in that era would have been anyone from then till now. Yeah. Any of them.
Yeah.
Easily.
That's what made that decade in terms of boxing, because of those four fighters. And they you hear John Fury talk about Tyson in this way, that some boxers would perform and be great in any era. And the likes of probably what he's saying about Golovkin, what I deliberately mentioned Kelly Pavlik and Jermaine Taylor, is they were good for that time, but they wouldn't have stood the test of time if you put them in with the likes of Duran, HAGLER, Hearns. They wouldn't have cut that mustard. They wouldn't have done.
What about Eubank and Ben?
Ben, I mean, I see Ben is a great puncher, but that's it.
Ben was a little bit too easy to hit, unfortunately.
Yeah,
he was mustard to watch, wasn't it? It was brilliant TV because you always knew with Ben you were going to get a scrap.
Yeah.
And anything could happen in a Ben fight. He could get knocked out himself, or he could be the one with that amazing left hand. He could be the one laying somebody out cold.
Well, the Jeremy McClellan fight, I mean, he nearly lost that in the first round.
Yeah, and look at what it took for him to get back into that fight. Yeah. I mean, apparently he did something to his neck and shoulder when he went through the ropes.
Yeah, he said on this
early on.
Yeah, he said on one of these ITV programs about it. Yeah,
Ben was raw aggression, wasn't he?
He was raw aggression, and he had something in him that just won't give up.
A bit like Fox.
Until he was absolutely shattered, But we're forgetting somebody in that little era, and
Steve Collins,
Michael Watson.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, Steve Collins probably come at the right time for him to beat Ben.
Yeah.
Because they were both on the decline.
Yeah.
Whether Steve Collins would admit that, he probably wouldn't do, would he? But I think that they were both past the best when he beat him. But Michael Watson had, in my opinion, was winning the Eubank fight, and in my opinion, he knew exactly what he was doing against Ben. When he just wore Ben out to the point where Ben was absolutely shattered, and then picked him off.
And just while we're talking about middleweights, one that I've got my eye on, who people are raving about, who I'm not so sure about, is Jamal Charlo. There's a lot of hype over the pond, isn't there? About both of them, to be honest.
About the twins, yeah. I think it's one of these cases with America, and we've seen it time and time again. Don't get me wrong, I think us Brits are like that with the Team G boxers. The kids that come through there. But I think this is another case. I mentioned it with Ryan Garcia, and you can go back, since we were talking about Joe Calzaghe, Jeff Lacey. I think this is another one. I think this is another example of I think somebody, you know, you put them in with somebody like a Golovkin. Golovkin have him for breakfast.
Yeah.
They get blown up way too quick, don't they?
Yeah,
And
in the States,
these big promoters in America make them out to be
yeah,
unbeatable, and they're very, very good at picking opponents for these fighters early on that make them look great.
yeah. The matchmaking's it's incredible.
You know, and then you know they get shots at the right time, and
Mm-hmm.
Well, Andy,
like
we've often spoke Frank
see it a
Warren's.
lot. You know, you see it a lot. You even saw it a little bit with Sean Porter. He was meant to be this unbelievable, unbeatable guy, and little Kell Brook goes over there.
Yeah.
You know, and makes it awkward and makes it uncomfortable, and he don't like it.
What in a way when that was though at the time,
Oh,
because of all the
yeah.
hype around Sean Porter. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. And you could reel them off, American fighters, especially in the last kind of 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Although, and just to jump in there was one occasion where we was at Bramall Lane where it was vice versa, where little old Eric,
I mean, let's have it right. We did pick that mate. You know, leading up to that fight, we were both like, this guy might be just a little bit better than everyone thinks he is.
But the fans around us did they? Sorry, mate. Ray, we was at Bramall Lane, Ray, for the Brook versus Spence fight. And we were watching the fight, and everyone around us, who clearly, obviously, Sheffield lads.
Yeah.
They had Brook up, and me and Andy was looking at each other and saying, are they watching the same fight as us? And then when Spence, obviously, Brook took a knee, didn't he, and quit.
Yeah.
You've never seen a ground go silent, did you, Andy?
Oh, mate. I turned to Carl and says, we need to get out of here and quick.
Yeah, you were sharpish, yeah.
Oh.
Because obviously different accent, you know. There's a little bit
I've been in those situations before. Yeah.
When the golden boy gets beaten,
our people was viewing that fight. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from people around me.
Yeah,
I mean, you could see it from rounds before.
Yeah,
he was breaking them down.
That Spence was taking control, and it was only a matter of time
before. Yeah. I mean, you're right. You know, you do get the odd American that comes in. I remember some time ago watching Crawford fight Ricky Burns, and don't get me wrong, I've never. I mean, my mate Dave would have told you I've never been Ricky Burns' biggest fan. I think he got a lot of. I think he got luck with Frank Warren getting him the world title fight, the WBO, because he always gets his kids WBO title fights, and I think he got a bit of luck. He works hard. Good luck to him. He's had a great career, but I don't see him as a great world champion or you know what he is. But Crawford did a job on him that night.
Now there's somebody that hasn't been overall real quality.
Yeah.
No.
I was going to ask you guys actually, what was your favorite Hagler fight?
Duran, mine was.
Duran.
I think it's hard to. I know it ended up being a scrap. It ended up being a shootout, but for me, just because of how good Tommy Hearns is, you can't look past the fight that's on the screen. Because this wasn't a rundown, beat up Tommy Hearns. This was a prime Tommy Hearns.
Yeah.
And Hagler just did a number on him. He took all his assets away from him and just beat him up and destroyed him. To be quite honest, so for me, it's that fight.
I think as well, what probably magnifies that fight is because you were watching two. Now what we now know to be all-time greats at their prime, which we don't often see. Hopefully we get it with AJ Fury, but if you look at the last time we saw Pacquiao and Mayweather was years after when it should have been happening. That's a trend that's happening now, but in the 80s it was like the best fought the best at the best time. Yeah,
you're right, it doesn't happen anymore.
That's how you build legacy, isn't it?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, though, boxing now has got to a point where there's that much money involved in these mega fights that takes priority over legacy for these fighters. You know, and in 20, 30 years' time, some of these fighters over the last 10 or 15, 20 years, they're going to think to themselves, what could have been, you know?
Well, it's. Do you remember a while about you guys were talking about you know, when you were first talking about trainers and you were talking about loyalty, but if you look at the American fighters and you look at take HAGLER for example, because the show is about HAGLER, you know how he stayed with his coaches start to finish. You don't see these great American fighters switching the trainers as often as, you know, whenever there's a loss, whenever there's a blemish, and I think that adds to their legacy as well.
Yeah, agreed. It certainly happened. I mean, it certainly happened in the 70s and 80s, didn't it? Boxing was a completely different thing then, because
it wasn't a business. It
wasn't a business. There wasn't that, you know, they weren't getting the sponsorship deals and the adverts, this, that, and the other that these fighters nowadays get. You know, these real big fighters, the likes of AJ, he's probably the best example into that. He makes more money outside the ring than he does inside the ring.
Yeah,
you know, that's no fault of his own, but because of that, legacy's not high on his priority. He'll say it is, but that's not the first thing. I mean, for me, as a fan, that should be his ultimate goal.
Well, there's not one logo on Earn shorts, is there? No.
This is what I'm talking about, because there wasn't any of that back then.
Yeah.
The only way these fighters got paid was winning fights.
Yeah. HAGLER was still working. HAGLER was still working for you know, he was still work. He would go to work and then he would still come out and do his road work.
This exactly. So I mean, how much hunger does that take? You know, to the need and the want to be the best. All for these silk pajama brigade fighters from nowadays, they wouldn't have even got in the ring if this was the case for that. And you touched on the GB team. Some of the lads that come out of that GB squad, they've got it made before they've had a pro fight. And it's unfortunate because some of them, you see some of them slip by the wayside when they should probably be greats.
I tell you what, because you guys are from the Midlands, sort of one amateur that I thought would do wonders as a pro turned out to be one of the biggest disappointments because he didn't have that attitude that HAGLER had, or even any of the four kings did. Frankie Gavin. For me, Frankie Gavin was a sure bet to do something in the pros. Don't get me wrong, he won a British title in that, and he did all right for himself from that point of view. But he was
didn't have the discipline, did he?
No, he didn't. He didn't. But this is what these guys in the 80s. That's all they had. You know, one of the things that stood out about Carlos Monzon, who was just before HAGLER. HAGLER even said he would have liked to fought Monzon because that would have, in his mind, would have defined who was the greatest middleweight of all time. And he didn't get to. But these came from proper poverty. And when they went to the Olympics and they came out, you know, I think HAGLER was asked to stay on for the next Olympic cycle. But allegedly he said, a gold medal, you can't pay for groceries with a gold medal.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So that drove him on. A bit like Roy Jones Jr. was driven on by, because he didn't get that gold, he got robbed. Yeah. Remember? Yeah. But with these kids, I thought Frankie Gavin, I thought getting sent home from Beijing, that would have been his Roy Jones moment. That makes sense. But
yeah, Billy Joe Saunders raves about Frankie Gavin in terms of natural ability.
Carl, they all do. Tony Bellew does. Tony Jeffries did. James DeGale did. You know, lots of people say Frankie Gavin was one of the most naturally gifted boxers. I mean, he was Britain's first world amateur champion.
quite sad, really, to watch his career spiral downwards like it did, to be honest.
Yeah.
Shows poor management of him as well, though, don't it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes these kids need a little bit of an arm around the shoulder and come on, what you doing? What you doing here? Because by the time he woke up himself, it was too late.
Yeah.
But then again, he was with Warren. He was with Hearn at one point. He had he was coached down by Jimmy Mark Tibbs. He had that lad in. I'm sure at one point he had Rob McCracken's brother, Spencer McCracken, in his corner. He had his old amateur coach, Tom Rooney or something like that. So he had all these different people giving him, who had him under their wing at one point.
He's got to want it, though, hasn't he? He's got to want it.
It's got to come down to the fighter at some point, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
And you look at Hagler, Leonard. They had that drive. But what I liked about Hagler is if he lost, obviously apart from the Leonard one, no one else. He put it right in the gym. He knew what he needed to work on. Put it right in the gym. There was no excuses. There was no, I wasn't right at the weight. I wasn't this. I wasn't right. Sorry, say that again.
It's a bit like Deontay Wilder. He's not blamed anyone for the Fury loss, has he?
Oh, not at all. He's not sacked anyone either, has he? Yeah? Wow. Oh my God, that's a different level. That one. These, because these.
Where does he go?
I wouldn't want to call them clowns because at the end of the day they've got to be brave to get in that ring. But I don't like that mentality, guys. I really don't. When I got into boxing through the likes of the Four Kings, and I've said before, my favorite fight of all time is the Sugar Rays, Robinson and Leonard. But you wouldn't have got that from them.
No.
You wouldn't have got that from them. And I just think the way they carry on sometimes. I think if Wilder had done a job on Fury, I don't think Fury would have come out with half the rubbish Wilder's come out with.
He'd have got in the gym and he'd have gone back out. Just the same way that Sugar Ray did when he lost Roberto Duran.
Yeah.
I genuinely worry for Wilder, though. I worry for him because I think he's gonna win. He's gonna win his legal battle. I think he's gonna get a third fight with Fury, and I think it finishes even earlier next time.
Unfortunately, this is one of them times where an American broadcaster and let's have it right, the WBC have blown smoke up an American fighter's backside for the whole career. He's had fighters picked for him. He's dodged number one challengers. He's had the easiest fights in the world, and he's ended up believing his own hype.
I mean, what was that?
Against someone that can actually fight.
I mean, what was that Ortiz rematch all about?
Well, I thought Ortiz was paggering him.
He was.
But
if I'm going to be straight with you,
I just wonder why he got a world title shot in the first place, though, Ray.
You see, for me, the thing with Wilder, I feel for all this when you talk about Wilder and the opportunities he gets and the look that he has, and you talk about having a dance partner. As soon as you come up against someone decent like Fury's very special, but you can't talk about Wilder and not talk about Dillian White. In the sense that, how long was Dillian White waiting for a chance at the WBC?
Terrible, wasn't it?
Shocking.
It's an absolute disgrace. And I rated WBC. For me, it's my favorite belt out of the four. It's that and the IBF are the ones that I rate the most in terms of prestige. But I reckon had White faced Wilder, White would have won that, and that he would have gotten one before Fury.
Yeah, he would have. He would have beat him.
Yeah.
It's disgraceful, and the problem for me is the WBC knew he'd beat him as well, and that's why they never ordered the fight.
Yeah, that Monsieur Sullivan. Yeah, he knew. Yeah.
Because of where the WBC are based, they want an American heavyweight champion.
Allegedly.
or allegedly. Just stinks to me, Ray. It stinks.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think USA boxing is in a great state through the weights, is it?
Well, it certainly isn't a heavyweight.
You've got Canelo, who's Mexican, the biggest ticket seller, worldwide. You'd argue, but he's in Texas a lot. Ryan Garcia calls himself Mexican stroke American, so I don't quite know what that means.
The thing with American boxing is the public are so disengaged with boxing in America. It's not like here, where you've got a real following, which is why we're doing this show.
Yeah,
and there's millions of us, people like us, that have got an opinion on boxing. Just sat, watching fights, watching cards. That doesn't happen in America the same way as it did in, say, the 80s.
Yeah, when HAGLER was in. Yeah.
When you got proper world champions, proper in all divisions. You had that golden era in the 90s with the heavyweights, and that was driven by public demand. That was driven by the TV broadcasters knowing that the public wanted it. Nowadays, I mean, who was it went out onto the streets? It might have even been Tyson.
Eddie Hernandez.
It was Eddie Hearn that went out and says, do you know who John Tay Wilder is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was Eddie Hearn, yeah, and everyone said no.
No one knew who he was.
Yeah.
He's the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. The pinnacle of boxing, that belt. Like you say, WBC belt should be the pinnacle of boxing.
That green belt,
division should be the pinnacle of boxing. It always has been, but standard everyday Americans walking around don't know who the heavyweight champion of the world is.
And that was the comparison. That was in New York, which is a fight city.
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah, and the comparison is you watch an Anthony Joshua fight, and I don't mean this I'm not sexist or anything like that, lads. I'll tell you straight now. But you go to an Anthony Joshua fight, you'll see women dressed up as if they're going to nights out.
Yeah,
and they're there, and I wouldn't call them boxing fans, but they're there because it's an event.
Yeah,
I'll go into work predominantly with women, and they all know who Anthony Joshua is.
Yeah,
that's right.
Do you all know who Ricky Hatton is? Do you all know if and that's the thing. I think we can appeal to the casual fan.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? In America, they can't. Now, I don't know whether that's because of all the money going into the NFL and the NBA and that kind of thing, or because of the amateur system. Because as much as as you can tell, I'm not Team GB's biggest fan in terms of, I don't think they're producing the fighters that we think they are. I think we're overrating some of the fighters they're producing. Yeah. But if you look at the American amateur system, it's not as good as what it was when you talk about, when Sugar Ray Leonard came through, when you had that golden generation coming through from, the Olympics between 1960 and 1976.
Well, their Golden Glory then used to be the pinnacle of boxing.
It was much better than our ABAs, yeah.
Yeah, but you look at it now, don't you? And you think, well, where's the next big American fighter coming from?
I mean, I watch the Olympics for the boxing and the 100-meter sprint final. That's it. Yeah, that's my interest in the Olympics. And I always look and think, who's coming through next from the States? Because ultimately, that's who Golden Boy are going to sign and who they're going to build up. But I've looked at them for years, But Jolie anomaly is when they've had 2012 they had a really bad team, but they had Errol Spence, Jojo Diaz, they had Rashid Warren. Funny enough, they've all gone to win world titles. But aside from that particular group, the rest of them have been poor. Like that one in Beijing, Athens, obviously they had Andre Ward, but the rest of the time they're being awful by their high standards. So I think America have got big problems when it comes to boxing.
Yeah,
And the sad thing is it's not going to change anytime soon.
I think you probably touched on it earlier, and you hit the nail on the head that all of the money in America goes to the likes of American football,
NFL. Yeah,
and basketball,
Mm-hmm.
because they're the creme de la creme, aren't they? When,
Yeah.
you know, when it comes to fan support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see, it's especially American football, and it's an all-day thing.
yeah.
It's an event, and they're absolutely crazy for it. If they had that support in boxing, then their situation in boxing would be completely different.
Yeah, it's not just that as well. It's the contracts that get thrown around in the NFL. You know, it's absolutely crazy money. And I know Eddie Hearn said a few times about the production quality of boxing on American TV, where often they won't even show the undercard.
It's shocking.
It's just the main event.
But how many times?
How are young fighters meant to get any exposure?
Well, but how many times as well though? Even when they put an undercard on, how many times is the undercard shocking?
Yeah. We've watched some bad ones, Andy, haven't we?
Shocking, and you know, there's no competitiveness. It's like they're scared to put one of the golden fighters in against somebody that might trouble them a bit.
Yeah,
Well,
don't like putting on 50 fights. Yeah.
We've seen some bad ones over here.
Yeah, but not anywhere near like that, mate.
Well, I'm not sure some of them BT cards.
Yeah, no. To be fair, but I suppose the difference is BT don't have.
They don't have the fighters. They don't have the fighters.
They don't have the caliber of fighters that Matchroom have got. I mean, we rave about and Eddie Hearn's matchmaking and the cards he puts on. It's changed a little bit since he's got a bit busier and gone to America and design and all that. It's not quite as strong as it used to be a few years, but especially when he does a big pay-per-view, he puts a mega card on then.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I think these pay-per-views have been, and I get this from a financial point of view, but some of these pay-per-views, he's just basically went, this is the main fight, a big fight. So you're paying your 20 quid, and then the rest of the undercard's being awful. And then what he said is, well, because I paid so much money for this big main fight,
right?
You know, and that's been disappointing. But you see,
them fight camps weren't bad, Ray, were they, in the summer? They were quite stacked cards.
That brings us up to my other point, because is that because of lockdown, he's had no choice. You've got to remember, lockdown, he can't always be flying people in from wherever, right? Money, because he hasn't got the crowds. You can't give, if he was to give a fighter 100, you can't give them 100 because there's no crowds. So you've got to give them 50 or 60. Yeah. And the other thing is as well, he does have a lot of prospects. He's the monopoly now in boxing, where before was split between him and Warren. Warren's got Liam Williams, and you know, he's got Callum Johnson now and Fury, and that's it. And you know, he's got Lyndon Arthur who beat Yard.
Has he got Fury? Because I can't quite work that promotional deal out with Aaron.
Yeah, it's complicated. I would kind of say he has, but because at the end of the day, he shares
he's never going to fight in the UK again, according to Tyson. So what exactly has he got?
Well, if you were Tyson, would you? Because I think after he does a job on AJ, he's probably got one fight left and then he retires.
Yeah.
Surely though, if you're a British-born fighter, you want to grace Wembley.
I don't know. If it was me, I'll probably, for me, my pinnacle of boxing is seeing my names in lights in Vegas, not Wembley. And I'm British-born through, you know, I'm British-born. For me, there's something special about fighting in America, seeing your name up in lights, whether it's Madison Square Garden.
I was about to say, if you'd have said Madison Square Garden, I'd have agreed with you.
Yeah.
Because that's got some real history. Vegas, for me, is glitz and glam. It's where the big money is. That's the only reason the fights are there. There's nothing special about the arenas them fights are in.
But that's
No, there's not, because they're not boxing. It's a bit like York Hall isn't a glamorous venue, but it's steeped in history.
Yeah.
You know, we can all sit here and think of many glamorous arenas in England, but they haven't got the boxing, they haven't got the history, and you can tell that in the atmosphere. So that's for me why I would pick America over.
Interesting though, when we've been to Bramall Lane and Goodison, it has the atmosphere has carried.
But they're, you see, they're football fans though, and we get this when us lads here go to the boxing if it's a local in Newcastle. There's a difference between your boxing fans, your knowledgeable boxing fans, and then your football fans, and I think that's why I enjoy watching the boxing when it's at places like Belfast or Liverpool, what I would call, because you mentioned about New York, I would call them fight cities.
Yeah.
Fight cities where the atmosphere, because anywhere can be loud, but there's a difference between knowledgeable boxing fans and their passion and atmosphere than just having loads of like football fans. Like when
what do you think of Josh
football fans?
What do you think of Josh Warrington's crowd when he's doing a presser?
Passionate, but again, it's passionate. He's brought his football. You know, he's brought his. You know, they've all got the Stone Island jackets on. He's brought his football fans, and it's the same with Ritson when he fights at Newcastle. All the St James's lot go, and it
was exactly the same with Froch when he fights at Nottingham Arena.
Yeah,
so
all the Notts County fans went.
Yeah,
what Notts County fans? They ain't got none up there.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of the cards, and you know, Eddie's done a good job. You know, he's done a really good job, and I feel for the small hall promoters, but I do think as well, hopefully this becomes a trend where you see more 50-50 fights. I'm looking forward to the likes of you know, so like for example, a couple of, you know, the last card we saw when we saw Ryland Charlton against Marco, that was a good fight. You know, at the start we saw Cheeseman against Eggington, that was a good fight.
Eggington won that.
Oh yeah. You know, I think I put a comment on. Not last time, but the one before that, your first show, when I said Cheeseman, it's not for me. Like, it's not for me.
I don't understand why he keeps getting backed.
Well, he got school off that the Spanish lad.
He's so easy to hit.
It's not only that, but he marks up as well, don't he? He's got a bit of action about him where he marks up.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when he blocks shots with your face, you know. That's essentially what he does. You know, let's be honest about it.
Yeah. Right, I'm conscious of time, Ray and Andy. So just before we go, let's have a prediction for Lawrence Okoli on Saturday, and then we can agree who predicted the best. So, Ray, what do you reckon is going to happen with Lawrence Okoli?
I think he'll stop him. I'm gonna go for round 9.
You've got the gist of this now, Ray, haven't you? No more sitting on the fence. You're going to give us some specific
yeah.
Andy, what about you?
I think Lawrence Okoli's got to put a show on. It's time he put a show on, and I'm going to go a little bit earlier. I'm going to go 7.
I'm going a little bit earlier than that. I'm going to pick 6.
Right.
So Okoli 6. Like you say, he's being paid the big bucks now, so he needs to start, putting his foot down. So
where do you think he goes? Where do you think he goes from this?
I can see him stepping up.
I was about to say that. Do you think he can step up?
Is it to heavyweight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's got the frame.
See, I think he can still grow into it.
I would like to see him at a cruiserweight for at least another few years. Sorry?
Sorry, go on.
Poor division though, isn't it, Ray?
It is, and I think that's because I think they've had 2 of those World Series tournaments. USIP won the first one, cleaned up. You know, it's been cleaned up again, but I think the cruiserweight's been lacking. The cruiserweight division's been lacking some quality for some years, and then the WBC's brought in that other division, hasn't it? The bridgerweight one, you know. But I think really a Corley can grow in that division. Give it some time, because let's be honest. If he was to step up within a year, I don't think he's going to be taking any of those heavyweights out. You know, I don't think he's. You know, we were talking earlier about levels when we were talking about Hagler. You know, he'll hit world level as a cruiserweight, but that doesn't necessarily translate to world level at heavyweight. And I think Usyk's probably finding that out now.
Yeah.
He struggled against Chisora. You know, he was losing against Bellew. I thought Bellew was winning that fight. He caught Bellew, fair enough. He struggled against Chisora.
Yeah,
he's not big enough, right?
Not powerful enough, not strong enough. He can't impose his will.
Can't keep him off, can he?
Yeah, he can't. He can't. Yeah.
Right. Go on, Andy. I'll let you close it.
Let's close it by saying it's been an absolute pleasure to watch Marvelous Marvin Hagler. The guy was an absolute genius, all down to solid hard work, and it's a real big shame that boxers that are around nowadays don't take a page out of his book, because we'd have a hell of a lot better fighters now.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. The man was a genius.
Right, on that note then, Ray, thank you very much for jumping on again. Brilliant session again.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, likely next Thursday, the next one, Ray. So any ideas that you want to do a topic on, although we will be touching on perfecting, obviously.
Yeah.
But anything that you want to debate with us, just drop us a message on YouTube and we'll sort it out, Ray, okay?
Yeah, look, 100%.
Cheers for your continued support, much appreciated.
No worries.
And we'll speak to you next week.
All right, then. See you next
Thanks,
Thursday.
mate.
Cheers.
See you next week, mate.